Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. The Kremlin says that Ukraine is yet to respond to a proposal for another round of direct talks on the 2nd of June in Istanbul. Turkish President Erdogan says Russia's talk proposal should not be taken lightly as Russian strikes in Ukraine's Sumy reportedly killed 2 people. China's foreign ministry has reacted to a US federal court's decision to block President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs, stating that trade wars have no winners. The Trump administration have appealed against the court ruling. Israeli strikes in Gaza have killed dozens of people today, including 23 at a refugee camp in Barrage, according to Gaza's civil defense. This comes as 4 people died at a UN aid warehouse amid a worsening humanitarian situation in the enclave. Meanwhile, Israel has announced a major expansion in the occupied West Bank, with ministers saying 22 settlements have been approved. This will be the biggest expansion in decades. While settlements are widely seen as illegal under international law, Israel disputes this. Syria has signed a $7 billion energy deal with a Qatari, Turkish and US consortium as the country aims to rebuild the nation following the ousting of Bashar al-Assad. Meanwhile, at the new American embassy in Syria, US envoy Thomas Barrack says peace with Israel is possible. China has slammed the US decision to revoke the visas of certain Chinese students as unreasonable and ideologically motivated. This comes after Donald Trump said foreign students should be capped at 15% amid an ongoing dispute with Harvard. Billionaire Elon Musk has stepped down from his role as a special government employee after spearheading sweeping federal cuts with his Department of Government Efficiency. Musk thanked Trump for the opportunity to reduce wasteful spending, insisting Doge will continue. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has arrived in Singapore for the Shangri-La Defense Summit. French President Emmanuel Macron is also set to deliver a keynote address, with several Western defence leaders arriving for Asia's premier defence event, which starts tomorrow. We start with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and in the latest turn of events, Russia says its forces have seized 3 more villages in eastern Ukraine. Moscow claims its troops now control Stroivka in the northeastern Kharkiv region, along with Shevchenko, Persha and Hanatkiva in Donetsk. In response to growing concerns over Russian aggression, NATO is reportedly pressing Germany to boost its military commitment. Sources suggest the alliance wants Berlin to contribute around 40,000 troops, although precise numbers remain classified. On the diplomatic front, Russia is still allegedly awaiting Ukraine's response to an invitation for peace talks in Istanbul on June the 2nd. Moscow plans to present a peace memorandum at the meeting, but has rejected Kyiv's demands to see the terms in advance, calling it non-constructive. Meanwhile, Russia has sharply criticised Israel's military actions in Gaza. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused Israel of carrying out collective punishment against civilians, marking one of Moscow's strongest condemnations since the conflict began in October 2023. In Russia, authorities have launched a criminal investigation after a deadly explosion in Stavropol, killing 2 men, including Tsar Gustiev, a city official who was expected to join the regional administration. And Russia is set to deliver Oreshnik missile systems to Belarus by late 2025, a move that could further strengthen military cooperation between Moscow and Minsk. Well, joining us to discuss all of these developments further is Professor Veselin Popovsky, a professor and Vice Dean at the Jindal Global Law School. Thank you very much for being here, Professor Popovsky. Let's first look at this proposed talk, which is set to go ahead on June the 2nd. Russia says Ukraine hasn't agreed to it. Ukraine say they want this peace memorandum before the talk so they can review it. Is this another impasse, or do you think this will be resolved before June the 2nd and those talks can go ahead?
Yes, this definitely shows activity, although the important thing is the result out of the talks, not just the talks as talks. And obviously, Russia is trying to delay the process by showing some constructive steps, but without ceasefire. So effectively, the initial position of United States, of Europeans, of Ukraine was ceasefire first, at least 30-day ceasefire, unconditional ceasefire, and then during the ceasefire to have the talks about the future peace agreement, about security guarantees, about sanctions, about reparations, and everything else. Russia is playing the opposite game. They are showing some activity, but these activities do not result in anything. The first round of negotiations in Istanbul only led to exchange of 1,000 prisoners of war. Still a good step for the families of those who return home, but that is very small achievement out of negotiations. International humanitarian law demands exchange of prisoners of war. It happens all the time, even in the worst enemies, they exchange prisoners of war. So it's not a big step what came out after the first Istanbul round. Let's see on Monday what happened with the second one. What is that memorandum which Russia is drafting but not showing to anybody? I don't expect any changes in the position. Russia will demand the same. They will demand the demilitarization of Ukraine. They will demand the withdrawal of Ukrainian army from the 4 regions, which Russia never could militarily conquer, and putting such unrealistic demands on the negotiation table already signals the unwillingness, I would say, of Moscow to reach any agreement.
Professor Popovsky, let's now look at Russia's claims that its forces have seized 3 more eastern Ukrainian villages, giving the ongoing offensive that Russia seemed to be making and ground they're making within Ukraine. What's the significance of that if these talks go ahead? Do you think it will be a positive point for Russia in those negotiations? And how does it place Ukraine?
I don't see much of a change here. They can claim 3 villages. Tomorrow they may lose another 3 villages. It happens all the time. It's very minor change on the battlefield. Usually Russian generals try to please Putin by reporting some success on the battlefield, but they never report any losses, obviously, not to embarrass themselves in front of Putin. So I don't really pay much attention to those news. When Russia reports some villages, then probably the previous day or the next day they will lose the same those villages, but they will never report that. Not a major change. And if we look in a longer term, if we take the last 12 months, 6 months, we don't see much of change. Russia still cannot conquer Pokrovsk, which is an important strategically town in Donetsk, but they are fighting and losing soldiers in 4-digit numbers daily. And still they cannot get Pokrovsk, which is a major hub in eastern Donbass. So 3 villages here, 3 villages there is not really any news.
Yes, I want to bring an end to this discussion by talking about these potential Oreshnik missile systems, which Russia says or is expected to deliver to Belarus by late 2025. How much of a provocation would this be? And do you think this could potentially alarm European leaders and Western allies?
Again, it's kind of a saber rattling, both sides, by the way. The German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, announced that there will be no restrictions anymore on any Ukrainian ballistic missiles in terms of long range reach into Russian territory. Also, there was a discussion between Zelensky and Merz about showing muscles and saying we also can move some missiles, some rockets from Russia into Belarus. Again, it's a dangerous development. Russia often even used the nuclear language as kind of a last resort threat when they see unification of NATO, of European allies, also United States, interestingly, also get a little bit frustrated with the delays by Vladimir Putin. President Trump was very angry at Putin over the last days, and he tweeted that. And Russia has to respond to that, as I said, by first of all showing some fake willingness to negotiate, but also by moving some of its weaponry closer to the border with NATO. And that's how I read that latest move into Belarus.
Professor Veselin Popovsky, thank you ever so much for joining us and covering those latest developments. Of course, ahead of those talks, we will bring you all of the developments in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war and the work towards peace. We now head to North America, though, and the hearing on the Harvard versus Trump case has begun in Boston. Both sides are all set to make their first in-person arguments in the federal court. The case centres on the administration's move to ban Harvard from enrolling international students. The Trump administration has argued that Harvard should no longer be allowed to host international students because it has violated civil rights by allowing anti-Semitic behaviour. However, Harvard says the administration's actions are not about fighting anti-Semitism or protecting Americans. Instead, the university calls it retaliation. Harvard claims the government is punishing them for exercising their First Amendment rights. The lawsuit says the administration wants to control Harvard's governance, curriculum, and even the views of its faculty and students. This dispute has left many Harvard aspirants uncertain about their futures. Let's take a listen.
Uncertainty of the situation is very hard for me. I don't know if I can go to Harvard. And so being unsure is very difficult for me. So what I would like in the coming weeks is that a decision is made, because no, I don't know if I will make it to America.
我觉得挺荒谬的，感觉不像是现在可以出现的事情。然后尤其是白天，大概看了一下其他人的，就是在刷了一下社交平台上面其他人的反应啊之类，就还是比较焦虑吧。因为，虽然不是什么敏感的专业，但是因为现在还完全没有开始流程，本来时间上就比较紧，因为学校那边是8月初就开学了。然后，再加上这个事情，因为他不知道会暂停多久，所以还挺担心的。
Well, this hearing has begun on a day that students are celebrating their graduation. Joining us to discuss this is Ross Feingold, a political risk analyst, joining us from Taipei. Ross, thank you as always for being here. Let's focus on this hearing and the significance of it. Of course, a long-running dispute between Harvard and the Trump administration that started over claims of anti-Semitism on campus and a lack of work being done by the university. Firstly, let's look at federal funding, because we know a lot of funding has been withdrawn from Harvard. Do you think that is enough and that will get the university board to reconsider the points the Trump administration are raising?
At the moment, the answer to that question is no, because it looks like Harvard is ready for a fight. They are fighting the Trump administration on multiple fronts, including the ban on Harvard admitting students from overseas. And there'll probably be litigation around these various issues, which would play out separately. So at the moment, at least, even the withdrawal of federal funding, and that's billions of dollars that Harvard, across its various divisions, took in from the federal government for different types of research projects, whether that's in the social sciences or medicine or other areas. It looks like Harvard is willing to fight the Trump administration, so now it's going to play out in the courts.
Yes, now we've set the scene. Let's look at this cap on foreign students. Currently at around 31%. Trump has said that this should be down at 15%. This, of course, at the end of a term. And as foreign students set to come over and look for housing and accommodation, as they start the term shortly. How impactful is this on those students, but also on the university as a whole?
Certainly, it's very disruptive to those students' lives. Right now, it's almost June, and they were planning on beginning studies at Harvard in August. They're traveling from overseas, as you said. They have to look for housing, and they're young people, so they're subject to their own emotions, and this is certainly something that's disrupting their lives. And also, unless other schools are going to suddenly make an accommodation to welcome Harvard students who are formerly Harvard students, it's too late to apply to other schools as well. Although, again, we have to see whether other schools, especially in the Ivy League, will make available a program to advance the timeline that students could transfer in, specifically the students who won't be able to go to Harvard. So that's also something to watch out for. But this litigation is going to take time. It's going to go to the appellate court. It might even go all the way up to the Supreme Court. It's clear the Trump administration is very firm in its view that Harvard is not being cooperative with the demands for information from the Trump administration. It's not being cooperative in explaining how it managed accusations of anti-Semitism among its foreign students. And now we're in litigation, and we'll have to see how that plays out.
Ross, this started as a conversation over anti-Semitism on campus. There's now talks about the influence of China at Harvard as well. Questions have been raised about ties that the university has with the Chinese Communist Party and the country as a whole. Do you think that this is moving forward and escalating to the point that it is just because of the Trump administration agenda, or do you think that they are raising a valid point?
There are certainly legitimate questions about funding that American universities have taken from China. When you take money from China, in many situations, you're basically taking money from the government, especially if you take money or enter into some kind of cooperative research program, student exchange with a university, because universities in China are controlled by the government. They're not private. And in many cases, major American universities have taken money from wealthy Chinese donors as well. Now, they may be independent of the government, but if they're operating in China and making money in China, they also have to rely on excellent relations with the Chinese government. So I'm struggling to be sympathetic to the universities because they're smart people and they should have assessed the risks of taking donations from Chinese companies or individuals or engaging in joint research efforts with Chinese universities or research institutions. So the onus was on them to do their due diligence and not necessarily assume that this would never be a problem.
Ross, one of the Harvard claims is that the government is punishing them for exercising their First Amendment right. This is a comment and a theme that they have spoken about since the start of this dispute with the Trump administration. Do you agree with them?
I don't know if this is really a freedom of speech issue. You know, the U.S. federal government has the right to admit or not admit foreigners into the country, whether that's for studies or for some other purpose like a tourism trip or a business trip. I would think Harvard's stronger argument would be a due process argument, and to argue that the decision by the Trump administration was hastily made without giving Harvard a chance to defend itself. So I find it a bit odd that they're making this into a free speech argument, since they're not, again, there's no right to have foreign students at their university.
Yes, and Ross, to bring an end to this discussion, what do you think is next for Harvard? And do you think that this could be a pattern that the Trump administration follows? We know that there's been action over Columbia University as well. Do you think this is just the start of potentially a domino of other universities being looked at and scrutinized for their policies?
For Harvard, there's going to be litigation on multiple fronts, whether that's the denial of federal funding for various research projects or the denial of Harvard's right to admit foreign students. So we have to watch out for ongoing litigation. It will go to the appellate courts and then up to the Supreme Court. But yes, I do think this is a model that the Trump administration is going to use with other universities that don't cooperate with the demands of the Trump administration. So those universities, especially prominent universities, so they can be made an example of. If they have ties to China, they should be prepared to be a target of the Trump administration.
Ross Feingold, as always, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing such a great insight there. We will be across all of the developments in the ongoing hearing and bring you all of those updates as we get them. But we move away from North America now. And after over a decade of diplomatic freeze, the United States has reopened its presence in Damascus. Newly appointed US envoy to Syria, Thomas Barrack, arrived in the capital today, raising the American flag over the ambassador's residence for the first time since 2012. Barrack praised Syria's new Islamist-led government under interim President Ahmed al-Sharaa. He expressed confidence that peace between Syria and Israel is achievable through dialogue, cooperation and mutual non-aggression agreements. Syria has also signed a $7 billion energy deal with Qatari, US and Turkish firms to revive its power sector. Signed in Damascus with interim President al-Sharaa and US envoy Barrack, the project aims to generate 5,000 megawatts, meeting half of Syria's electricity needs. Meanwhile, the US now plans to remove Syria from its state sponsor of terrorism list, pending a 6-month congressional review. Barrack also called for the repeal of the tough Caesar sanctions, saying President Trump himself is impatient to end them. This comes after Trump's recent meeting with al-Sharaa in Riyadh and reports that Syrian and Israeli officials are already in direct talks. Well, joining us to discuss these developments is Ali M. Abushbak, an independent Palestinian researcher who is joining us from Cairo. Ali, thank you ever so much for being here. Let's first look at the reopening of the US Embassy in Damascus. We've also, of course, just relayed there that the Trump administration is looking to ease sanctions, a move that the EU has already done and other leading Western nations have called for. What's the significance of this US support for Syria?
Thank you, Joshua. The thing is, this is a good news after 1.5 decades of closing the American embassy in Syria. They are going to reopen it, and we have witnessed during the Riyadh meeting, Donald Trump, he announced that America is going to remove the sanction on Syria. So I guess nowadays we are going through the new Syria without Bashar al-Assad regimes after they overthrow it in the end of last year, and as well as Mohammed al-Shara, he is going to open with the Western country after the long tension between the oldest regime that led by Bashar al-Assad. So we have witnessed a lot of tension between Syria, that previous Syria, and we are witnessing now a new Syria that more friendly with Western country, and as well as after the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad, nowadays that Iranian proxy in the area become more weak, because Bashar al-Assad regime used to support Hamas group in Gaza and support Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. And nowadays, after the danger has been removed, now America and the Western country have a new trust about Mohammed al-Shara, despite his root and mental that related to al-Qaeda, extremely he's trying to show how much he's a moderate and how much he's taking a balance with the conflict. Especially Syria was the central of the conflict between Arab and Israel occupied the Golan in 1967. Nowadays, that the relation between Syria and America, it's more, I guess, good. And according to Donald Trump, he's going to give a new government or a new authority in Syria a new chance to see their willingness and their plan with regarding these things. During that time when Donald Trump, he met Mohammed al-Shara, the temporary president of Syria, he confirmed that he's going to recognize Israel after the situation becomes stable. And here I have met a lot of Syrian people when I asked them, what's your opinion about recognizing Israel and normalize the relation with Israel? Most of them, they said, we don't care about it. We care just about the situation in Syria. We care about the removing the sanction and the economy of Syria. Because as you know, since the revolution in Syria 2011, there is an economical crisis in Syria, and the value of Syrian currency, it's reduced a lot of, and incredibly reduced. So
yes.
As well as, meanwhile, yesterday, Benjamin Netanyahu, during his speech in Israeli's parliament, Knesset, for the first time, he mentioned the name of Muhammad al-Shara as Muhammad al-Shara, not Muhammad al-Julani, as we know him previously from Al-Qaeda, because his nickname was Muhammad al-Julani, because he belongs to Julanian area. Yes. Which Israel occupied it. So is these things, or is this mentioning the name or official name Muhammad al-Shara going to tighter relation with Israel? Also, it's worth mentioning that last week Israel has successfully retrieved as the stuff and idiom of their Israelis spy in Syria after 60 years of hanging him, Edi Cohen, and his stuff now is in Israel. So also, as well as, despite the tension between Israel and Syria because of Druze minority, but as we have witnessed that Muhammad al-Shara is trying to handle it and to, to be a balance to solve the issue with the doors sanction in Syria. So we are going through.
Ali, sorry to interject. We are running shorter on time, but I'm glad you spoke about Israel there. Of course, Thomas Barak has said that there is hope for peace between Israel and Syria moving forward, and we will, of course, keep our eye on that and the developments. But I just want to end by talking about this energy deal, $7 billion energy deal, not just the United States, but we're also looking at Qatari and Turkish firms as well. The state of Syria following years of civil war, the Bashar al-Assad regime, we know that there are hundreds of thousands potentially unexploded munitions and bombs in the country. How positive is this a step for the people of Syria?
It's a good question, Joshua, because also there is a more 60 million Syrian displaced and they are in diaspora. So I guess this is giving the hope for the Syrian people. And we have witnessed here in Egypt, there is a several of movement to return to Syria. So I guess the situation is going to be a stable and it's going to be a more safe in Syria, especially after this agreement. And I guess it will like retrieve and resurrection of the Syrian economy. So it's this kind of things. It's taking the side of America. Syria, the new regime could be relieved and could be provide a new service for the civilians in Syria, especially they are suffering for more than 1.5 decades of the civil war in Syria.
Yes, Ali M. Bushback, as always, thank you ever so much for joining us. We will, of course, be across all of the developments in Syria, the Middle East and across the world. But for now, that is all we have time for. For those updates and much more, stay tuned to NewsX World.